Also, I'd like to say we're here in the offices of the Vernal City people, and we want to thank them for all of their hosting and helping as we've been getting this hearing going this morning. First item on the agenda this morning is a briefing on the IOGCC meeting that recently occurred in Oklahoma City. And John Rogers attended that, and he'd like to go ahead and give you a few notes from that meeting and what occurred.
Thank you, John and Chairman Gill. Appreciate the opportunity to report on my chance to meet with the IOGCC in Oklahoma City earlier this month. Normally, Director Baza would go to that, but he had another obligation to attend to, and so I covered for him there. And in that meeting, there's a group called the SOGR Board. SOGR stands for State Oil and Gas Review Exchange. And John is a member of that. I covered for him there. And at that, they went over processes of how the states review other states internally. One of those that they did is actually they reviewed Idaho's process, and Idaho became the 31st member of the IOGCC. In that, I believe John Baza, Nick Tu of Alabama, who is a similar position as John is in Utah, Kathy Forrester of Alaska, and Matt Lepore of Colorado reviews Idaho and worked with that and came up with the process is that in this SOGR review, other member states will review other states and show their weaknesses and strengths and give them a review. So it's a good process to look at things internally. So that was part of the SOGR review that I was a part of. Also in that process, there is what we call a states roundtable, and there's about 31 states and provinces that are members of the IOGCC, and they go around and take 5 minutes to talk about what is going on in their state issues, and things that we reported is our production, our funding, the difficulties with horizontal well drilling. And at the end, Kathy Forrester was heading that group, brought out what the main ideas were, and the two of the things were production. We see production in some states being flat, which is a good thing in that situation, to where we're declining 15 to 18%. So we are, in that end of things, are declining more rapidly than other states, and I think that's because of the lack of new drilling coming here. So that's something we got to be very much concerned with. They also looked at funding. I had an in-depth conversation with representatives from Ohio and Alaska, how they handled their funding challenges. And it's something we're going to be looking at this summer to address with the legislature, because I think it's critical that we look at how we're going to go forward from this time frame. We have a resolutions committee that I was involved with. And in that, I passed out resolution 17.051, and this is a resolution that came out 2 years ago under John Baza's direction, and he continued to say that we got to continue on with this. And so the resolution committee accepted this to extend it out again. And this primarily says that states have historically demonstrated effective, responsible, and economic management of oil and gas regulation, and also have done a great job in environmentally protecting the environment for regulation of oil and gas. And so it's a move to move oil and gas regulation from the federal level down to more on a local level. And it also states in there that this is not without precedent. There's EPA, where we've been given opportunity to have a Class 2 program, and also in the coal mining, on our coal side, they have primacy from the federal government. So those are things that it's not without precedent, but that's something that this resolution is looking for, and I gave you a copy of that. It's interesting to note that IOGC management, upper management there is very well connected with the Department of Interior and the EPA, and they've had long conversations with them concerning all sorts of matters concerning oil, gas, and mining for that matter. So there might be a change coming, but it's not going to be what we call very quickly. It's a slow-moving process. Also, there's a group that's getting it together, and they're calling what they call cooperative federalism, and they've identified 5 areas. One is management of public lands, technological development, environmental protection, resource conservation, and state workforce development. They pointed to Utah with their strong leadership from Governor Herbert and Representative Rob Bishop to see if we could take a lead in the management of public lands, since we are a public land state, and move forward with that. That's in the works now, but they look to us to sort of be the leadership there, so we'll see how that falls out in future meetings. That was pretty much the business side of things. They also have opportunity for presentations of what is going on in industry. A couple of the things that I went to, one was the Idle Well program. We had representatives from New Mexico, North Dakota, Nebraska present how they handle idle wells. In our state, we call them orphan wells, and we have a very robust program that we're working with that. But it is interesting to know how each state does this differently, and we now have a survey, and they're putting together a study on this to see how we can handle this in the future, because it really is a liability out there for all states, and it's become more and more critical as we see the downturn. Another committee I went to was the Public Outreach Committee, and this is the idea of how to get the idea of energy, to educate people about energy, particularly in this case oil and gas. And there's some websites I'd like to refer you to. The OERB, which stands for Oklahoma Energy Resource Board, is one that has some great videos out there. You can look and it educates people on everything from hydraulic fracturing to responsible drilling to all sorts of things. And so it gives you an idea how we can educate people. Also, Ohio has a great website. It is the OOGEEP, Ohio Oil and Gas Energy Education Program. And so they got together in round tables and tried to get the idea how to educate people on this. Of course, we have our mineral and petroleum literacy program, but our budget there is tiny compared to what we're doing. So we'll take baby steps here, but we're trying to move forward with the education of energy. I think we got some of that yesterday when we saw that coal-fired energy plant and how important that is and how people really don't understand the nature of energy. Some other interesting programs I saw there which will be of interest to us. These are mostly done in the East, but there's a group called Gray Rock Engineering, and they have a process where they take flared gas and convert it to fuel right on site. Right now it's a little kind of semi-truck size converter, but it's the Fischer trope. You may have heard that term. It's a way of converting is coal gasification back in World War II. Now they're taking natural gas and converting it to almost like a gasoline. It's expensive right now, but it's a process that people are looking at, and I think it's a beginning to look at how to handle flared gas. Another process in that technology was one called Eureka Resources, and again they bring on a small truck. It's on skids, and they convert wastewater, produce water into water that can be debrined and to offset our sodium chloride and calcium chloride, and those two products are actually being bagged and sold. And so they're cleaning up the water, and they are also getting a product out of it, but it's very expensive. It's about $4 to $6 a barrel. But again, that's a process that can work through, and maybe in the future it can become cheap. Right now, this is only being done in the East because they have such a problem with getting rid of their wastewater there, and they have the problems of induced seismicity, which we've not seen here yet. So the injection is probably still the way to go in Utah, but that's something out there worldwide. Another issue is they had representatives from PHMSA. I got all these acronyms. That stands for Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. And that's where they've come out now with the process of how to handle gas in order to store that. And you can either get primacy from the federal government or you can ask for, or they'll do it. So it's a process of what we want to do there. Right now, this is only for natural gas, not the liquids like we see down in with Magnum, but that's something that we'll be considering in the future on how those will be handled. So it's very educational. It's always good to get with people of our similar stature in other states to compare notes and see what's going on there. So I think Chairman Gill and Carl, you've been there a few times and you know the value of that meeting. So I'll leave it up to that if you have any questions.
Board members, any questions on that? You have to touch just that green light has to be on.
John, could you repeat those websites, please?
Okay, the one is the...
Let's do this. I was going to, can I interrupt? Will you just email those to
Sure.
us?
That would be much better.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, we'd like those websites if you wouldn't mind.
And I'll also give you the notes of those two companies that are doing that research. It's interesting to see what they're doing.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that as well. Well, thank you very much. If board members, if you've never had a chance to go to one of those, it's really a first-rate training experience to be able to meet with the head directors and thinkers within the oil and gas regulatory environment, and governors are there, and it's really an interesting process. So, John, thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Plaza.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. I would mention that the current gubernatorial chairman of the IOGCC is Governor Hutchinson of Arkansas, and he just recently accepted a renomination to get a second term as chairman. So he'll start that second term at the fall meeting of IOGCC, so he'll be in that for another year. The next item on our briefing agenda is to hear a update of the 5-year review process for the board's procedural rules. As you can imagine, all of our rules are due for sunsetting after a 5-year period of time. And now we have the board's procedural rules, which guides how parties do business in front of the board, is up for renewal at this time. And I'll let James Owen of our staff present that to you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as John mentioned, we have been going through the process of completing this 5-year review of the board procedural rules. I've handed to all of you a copy of our flowchart process of how this works, and the second page of that handout includes a list of all of the procedural rules that we're going to be asking for your approval to renew today. And so we have reached a point of the process where we are going to need the board's approval to file this renewal. So we'll step through the chart just briefly, and I can describe how we have completed the necessary processes for this renewal process. In box 1, the first thing that happens is we have the Office of Administrative Rules that notifies the division which rules are due for renewal.
We'll keep troubleshooting.
Want to use this one?
Can you hear that okay? Does that work? Okay, we'll just go with this one. So we got that notification from the Office of Administrative Rules on the 30th of December in 2016. And then the second part is the division initiates an internal review of those rules. Essentially what we're doing is we're asking whether or not the rules are still suitable, and it's an opportunity for the division to justify rule continuation. And that internal review was sent out on the 16th of March, and that included the division's administration, the division's programs that are impacted by the board rules, our attorneys in the AG's office, and then also the board's attorney. The third step, we seek comment from our informal rules review group, and we sent out a notice to the group informing them of the rules that were going to be renewed and asking for comments on the 3rd of April. And we left a 30-day comment period for them to provide any comments that they may have. And you can see in box 4, the comment period closed on May 3rd. We did receive 2 written responses to our request for comments. They came from OSM and BLM, both federal agencies. Had no suggested modifications to our rules, and we had no other written comments besides those. So the next step after we get all those comments compiled is to present those comments to the board, which is what we're doing today. And as you can see in boxes 5 and 6, this step would be to get this board's approval to have file a renewal. Now, how these work is the rules will automatically lapse if we don't renew them, and if the board chooses not to renew them, then the Office of Administrative Rules requests that we go through a repeal process. So essentially, you can see in boxes 7 and 8, there are kind of only 2 ways to go. So we've completed all of the necessary parts for this renewal except for that submission, and we need the board's approval to do that. So the request would be that we could get this board's approval to submit to OAR a renewal of the board's procedural rules as listed on the 2nd page of your handout. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Board members, any questions? I have just a couple. Just kind of give us on step number 3 where you go out for public comment. Did you receive much in terms of the review comments or concerns from any parties?
The only comments that we got were from the OSM regional manager and then the BLM local office, and both of them just provided a general comment of no recommendations of modifications. But from the group that we submitted it to, we didn't get any other particular feedback, either written or verbal.
Okay. And I don't recall any concerns about gaps or voids or things like that. So I guess the ball is now in our court to, a motion would be in order to, I guess, what is exactly we need to, you need from us today?
We need the board's approval to submit the renewal. Once we submit the renewal, then the Office of Administrative Rules will assume that we've done our due diligence and they'll renew these rules. And so then they'll be valid for another 5 years.
Okay. I need a motion in that regard. Turn on your mic.
I would move that the board approve this action and move forward with the renewal of the rules.
I'll second the motion.
The motion's been made and seconded. Any comments on it? The motion before you is to give the board's approval to send these rules to the Office of Administrative Rules for renewal. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Let the record show that was unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we will continue with the agenda, which is, the next item is other items, and I'm going to report to you that we've received approval from the Governor's Office and confirmation by the Senate on renewal of 4 board members for an additional term on the Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And explain to you a little bit about how this process works. On May 1st, the Governor's Office submitted to the Senate, State Senate, a letter stating which all boards and commissions the Governor wanted to have approval for and confirmation by the Senate. It was a letter that included, I'm guessing, between 50 and 60 names for various boards and commissions. And in our case, he recommended for the Board of Oil, Gas and Mining that Rich Borden, Mike Brown, Susan Davis, and Gordon Moon all be reappointed for additional terms, which would expire on March 1st of 2021. That's another 4 years. So then the governor called what he refers to as an extraordinary session of the Senate on May 12th, which is specifically for the confirmation of these names. The Senate met on that date, and I got a letter this past week that indicates the Senate approved, as far as I can tell, all of the names submitted by the governor. So each of you who are up for renewal or a second term should get your own letter from the governor's office stating that, if you hadn't already. But I just wanted to pass that on to you, that unfortunately you're stuck with us for another 4 years.
Congratulations to you all.
I'll talk briefly about upcoming calendar and agenda items. If I can get to my piece of paper here. Here it is. So following today's board hearing, we'll move into the month of June. There is another board hearing scheduled for the 28th of June, the fourth Wednesday, and that's in Salt Lake City. I'm going to give you my apologies right now. I have a meeting with the EPA Region 8 Administrator in Denver on that day. So I'm going to turn the briefing over to John Rogers and Dana to run at the next month's board meeting. And then following that, we move into July. In July, we have the Uintah Basin Oil and Gas Collaborative meeting scheduled on the 13th. And we've been doing those for the past several times in Duchesne, at the Duchesne Event Center. The last one we had was the Waxy Crude Workshop, which took place in April. So the next meeting we're going to have is July 13th. And right now, John Rogers and I have discussed it, and we think we're going to do a theme of gas storage and pipelines with the interim final rule that is in place with PHMSA, and John mentioned them, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials and Safety Administration. We think it's appropriate to have at least a discussion with the operating community about that rule and what may lie in the future as far as pipelines and gas storage in the United States. So then we'll continue, and we'll have our July board meeting on the 26th. Again, it's scheduled in Salt Lake City, and that is as far out as our calendaring goes at this point. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman. We've concluded our briefing, and you may continue.
And I will not be with John, but I will not be here for the June hearing. I'll be out of the country, so Mr. Hanson will be our vice chair will be running the meetings. And board members, I would ask you to help him any way you can, the same way you've been kind enough to help me when.
I think the best help would be to cancel the meeting.
This is the time for public comment. And John, thank you very much. Mr. Director, we appreciate you and what you do. And James Owen, thank you for your presentation, and Mr. Rogers for yours. This is the time for public comment, but we would invite any of you from the county commissions. There's an emerging issue that we talked about at the legislature last year about where this board has authority and how it dovetails in many respects with what the counties are trying to do. And this is a good time and a good place maybe just address that and to provide the board with what your thoughts are on the subject and where the some of the hot spots may be. And I know this is kind of putting you on short notice, and so if we haven't given you enough time to fully respond to that, if you'd like to follow up with something in writing, we'd be happy to do that. But please come forward. I think you probably know better how to run these mics than we do, so Commissioner Winterton.
Yeah, Commissioner
For the
Winterton.
record,
from
we do
Duchesne
keep a
County.
recording. If you would just and identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, Commissioner Ron Winterton. As the chairman has spoke, we did have a bill this last year was going to address what we could see was going to be a problem, and I believe it was Senator Hinkins that ran the bill. He pulled it, and we're going to start working here in the next month or so on that to get it where we wanted it, and we'll invite the board to be to those meetings. I believe it's Jeff Hartley that's going to coordinate that for us, and hopefully we'll get to where we wanted to be. This last year it just got a little bit confused, and we don't want to have that this next session. So
can you address for the board, just if you wouldn't mind, and some of what was the where is the intersect or the
what it
concern?
came down to is that
Kind of the fact situation.
we believe that this board has the right to regulate the oil and gas drilling activities. And when it comes down to the land use and that's where it comes down to the municipalities and the counties. And I believe that this last go around with Ballard City, they were trying to get into the areas where I think a lot of us were uncomfortable because they were wanting to do your job. And so it was the intent to try to distinguish what this board does and then what municipalities and counties do as far as regulating land use. And they were trying to regulate that they couldn't drill inside of the city, and it's good. We don't want to go there. You see what's happening in Colorado, and it's every entity does their own thing, and it makes it pretty hard for these companies to do business when they have to look for so many different regulators trying to regulate how they do business, and we don't want to see that here in the state. And so that was the intent of that bill, and we will work on it this summer and get it where we define that more readily. And that was the only intent of that, is that we don't want to be in the same position that Colorado is in. You guys
and we couldn't
are the
agree more.
specialists.
And
so
one of the things that, I mean, if you take and just, this is just me speaking for myself, but if you look at the IOGCC resolution, it was now you have two regulators of oil and gas, the federal government and the state in a lot of things, and try to get it down to more toward the one-stop permitting process that would facilitate oil and gas drilling. But by the same time, we need to take into consideration the health, safety, and welfare statutes that the counties need to fulfill and want to fulfill. And somewhere in between, there's occasionally an intersect. And then in Ballard City, I don't know all the facts. Maybe there's someone here that does, but
they
would you mind just addressing what they originally asked for, or
well, they started getting into areas where this board should have total say in it as to whether they can frack and whether or not you can drill and how to drill horizontally, directional boundaries. I mean, a lot of the setback ordinances are in place in most of these entities already. That's pretty much where I feel our authority should be limited to, as to the safety of the residents. And when it comes to the specialty, this board has it. And that's just needs to be defined, because I think Ballard was trying to take over your role and tell them how they could do business, and that's not their place. They can regulate where they drill as far as within the city limits, how close to schools, churches, businesses, something like that. And there are ways that they can get there, but this board has that expertise. So we were not trying to step on anybody's toes other than trying to clarify. Ballard, wait a minute, back up. Dogum has all of this covered, and they just went beyond that. And then they came back after about 4 months. I think they came back in line to where they should have been to start with, but still, we don't need to have this going on in every municipality in the state of Utah. When you look at the potentials of drilling, whether it's in Grand County or, you know, someplace else, Sevier County, where they have a little of it, but not lots. If a boom comes, then all of a sudden they want to plant their feet and say, whoa, wait, hold on. We want to have this in place. So that's what we'll be working on, is to just clarify those positions better.
And another emerging issue that's part of this, and I don't believe it's happened in Utah to my knowledge, but while there's a setback requirement for the oil and gas industry, there's not a setback requirement for the developer industry. And so after a well's been drilled, development has come in, and then the developer has allowed wells to be within 100 feet, or pardon me, homes to be within 100 feet of a well. And we've got I think there's, as part of this process, it might be wise to look at that both ways, that, you know, who's first and who's comes second. And if you reverse the fact situation where the well's there first, then what do you want to do with that, and how to deal with that?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's a good point, because we feel like that's probably comes back to us to regulate how close those developers can come to those. Yeah. It's like putting in a freeway and then everybody complaining about it when they bought their house knowing the freeway's there. That's what we do out here in the basin, is oil and gas, and most people are very accepting of it, but they don't want it in their backyard. But that's what we are, and when you come out here, you have to come to expect that there's a little give and take, and so that is an area where we need to look at, because with new technologies, I think that they can still get to their resources without impeding on takings of the land. And we're seeing that with our large farms and that they've really devastated some of the large farming operations by putting oil wells out in the middle of the fields and that. And they've, over the last 3 or 4 years, they've really done a good job in trying to go out to the edge of the pivots, or, you know, so that the wheel lines aren't interrupted, because those are impacts that we see that need to be at least analyzed and looked at when we go ahead and give drilling permits. And so all of those things, we're willing to sit down and try to come to some kind of a resolve.
I think I think I speak for all the board members when I say that there's an open invitation to periodically come before us, and that's one of the reasons we're out here, was to hear some local concerns or what the industry is doing that we have jurisdiction over, that we might be able to address and be aware of.
Well, and we appreciate your board and the staff. I mean, you have wonderful staff. We have a good relationship with them, and feel like that, you know, if we have a problem, we can talk with them. And then sometimes we act as the liaison with the industry and you. Sometimes they get frustrated, but we haven't found anything we couldn't work through yet. So thank you to this board and your staff.
Thank you very much. Anyone from, please, we'd like to hear from all of the county commissioners if you're so inclined. So we just want to ask that you use that one mic, not that one.
Yeah. My name is Bill Stringer. I'm chairman of the Uintah County Commission at this point.
Dwayne Shepard, Uintah County Commissioner.
I don't want to cover the same territory that, in too much detail that Commissioner Winterton did, but I do have a few things I'd like to mention about it. First thing I want to say is this is I think, the anniversary, my 29th year of attending these meetings. I started in May of 1988. Off and on, I've been through many boards. Our first issue was First Zone Production with Mr. Dean Christensen in the Cisco Desert. I don't know if he still has business in front of the board or not. But anyway, that being said, we do appreciate relationship with the board. We do appreciate our relationship with DOGM. We think that there's a very good job is being done. The one thing I would say about SB 189 is that Uintah County was kind of taken by surprise by the bill. We absolutely agree that there is a place for, in fact, we want to be sure that those with expertise are doing what they need to do. There's no doubt that the county, the cities really do not have expertise in drilling, casing programs, fracking, et cetera. Those are technical issues which belong with DOGM. No concern there. I think what we saw from the bill was the possibility or the potential that the local municipalities, the county, the cities might lose a certain amount of authority with respect to health and safety. And those are things that we feel, whether that's air quality, whether that's enforcing zoning, those are the things that looked like might be of concern. Not to say that they were going to happen, but that as long as we each recognize and understand each other's authorities, we're good. Agree also with Commissioner Winterton that we certainly don't want to see Boulder County, Colorado tactics in Utah. Waste of time, waste of effort, a lot of grandstanding with no real effect in the end. And so I think the ability to work on SB 189, the ability to have that discussion and make sure that the folks who know best are dealing with the issues, it's going to work out just fine. I'm not exactly sure that Ballard, in being in Uintah County, I'm not sure that they even really understood exactly what they were getting into. Another thing that Commissioner Winterton pointed out was that we have had a kind of contentious relationship with private landowners and energy companies. And a lot of that has been ameliorated, I would say, by communication. I think that the Utah Petroleum Association, some of the meetings that we have where we get landowners and local government involved with industry has gone a long way towards fixing that. But 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was much more contentious. So where local municipalities tend to get drawn into these is complaints from landowners about how they feel they're being treated by oil and gas companies who have a valid right. And there's just a lack of understanding, but it's gotten much better through continued effort. I wouldn't say it's perfect yet, but that was probably one of the motivators for, I think, for Ballard City. It's certainly a temptation for elected officials to want to react to those kind of complaints, but I think there's probably a better way than just a SB 189 as it was written was a little concerning to us. So I think that's about all I would like to say. Again, very happy to work with the board, very happy to work with the division. appreciate you coming out. 29 years ago, there weren't many trips out to Moab or to Vernal, so it's always good to see you. Glad to have you, and thank you. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to take them.
Board members, any questions of the commissioner?
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Again, Dwayne Shepard, Uintah County Commission. I want to expressly thank you and all the folks who were with us yesterday for spending the time out here to visit our power plant and see what a fantastic facility that is. And we truly do, at least for me, my opinion is that is one of the best run power plants in the nation. And also too, one of the, this was SB 189 that we're talking about. The reason I visited I've been to every Ballard meeting, city meeting since I was appointed as commissioner, is I've got a call from a family friend who they had the gas company, actually oil company, drill right in the middle of their pivots or right by their pivots, and they couldn't use it. They had to restructure their water lines. And that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure I knew exactly what was going on. I haven't gone through in depth of everything that has happened with 189 and truly looked at all the effects that could happen on it. But I want to make sure those folks are protected too. Where maybe the well could have been repositioned, maybe done a little different drilling on it or whatever happens to be. But I wanted to make sure that this becomes personal on these type of issues, and just express that to you too. But again, I thank you for coming out. I appreciate you being here in our county. We believe we've got a lot to offer, and our oil and gas out here, I believe we're still producing the most in the state, if I'm not mistaken. And so with that we have responsibility, and does come some privileges to you in a county that other counties we recognize don't have the abilities to produce what we have. So we thank you for your support out here. And if you have any questions for me as a new commissioner, I'd be happy to answer those too.
I just wanted to comment that we are concerned with landowner concerns as well. So we welcome your input and the input of the other commissioners.
Thank you. I'd like to spend more time with you folks as we go through these next few months too, if that's to get to know you a little bit better too.
I'd be more than willing, and I believe several other board members would be, to take a special trip out here to meet with some of your landowners to find out what the issues are. We'd like to bring a member of the division with us so that it's combined. But if you feel that something is heating up, or there might be a misunderstanding, or it might help you solve a problem by having other faces involved, we invite you to invite us. So
absolutely,
we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and I believe we're all working for the greater good. We want to do what's right. There's a medium in there somewhere. We'll find it.
Let me comment on that. Please. Just 1 minute, and see if other board members want to talk about this. But it might be worth your while just to hear maybe from us just what we were trying to do. And when I got on this board, I'll again, speaking just for myself, I really didn't understand why the industry wasn't more interested in Utah. And just to give you a little bit of my background, being an in-house oil and gas lawyer, I was at the table when the capital was being allocated and the capital was being spent. And it was clear to me that the capital wasn't coming to Utah as the same level it was to other states. And so in some conversations I had with two CEOs of the few companies that do a lot of drilling in Utah, I asked them why not. And there was some real questions about what the resource was. But then also our rules limited horizontal wells to 1 mile, and the game was 2 miles. And so we set up 7 pilot projects for them to come in and try and find out what they had and also to see if it was worthwhile for them to bring their capital here. But also being in-house, I know there's 2 or 3 things that just companies cannot tolerate, and that is unpredictability. That alone will send a company's capital dollars elsewhere in a heartbeat. So one of the things that we've tried to do is to let the companies know the rules of the game before they play, and then try to be consistent with that. And if we're going to change the rules, let it phase in over several years. And so when the Ballard City problem came in, it was viewed, at least by me, as a real message of unpredictability, that Utah was perhaps going down the road of Colorado, and we were going to, you know, all this effort we had with these 7 pilot projects. Well, as a result of that, we now have at least one company. We've had, I guess, in the last 24 months, we've had the largest, in terms of value, the largest hearing ever held in the state of Utah by anyone at any time. It was in the range of $20 to $50 billion in Duchesne County. And in the last 24 months, we've had 6 hearings in well north of $1 billion in terms of the drilling plans and the potential to spend capital. We have one company now that is actually started to implement that, and they are basically at the rate of $20 million a month, and over their 5-year plan should be in the range of $1 billion worth of spending. And so we've gone from 1 rig to 8, and we're hoping that we can increase that. But by the same token, we need to do this as partners within our realms. You have titles, 17 of the Utah Code. We have Title 40, and there's got to be a way to work through this development, the boom that we're hoping that will come. And the thing that one of the assumptions that we're relying on, or we believe, is that we're going to have shorter boom-bust cycles between them, where it's been 7, 8, 10 years of one and then a few years of the other. It looks like it's going to be 3 or 4 years boom-bust, boom-bust. And so if we're not ready, both as the county, local government, and this board and the division, we're going to be caught flat-footed. But if we are ready, that capital is available in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the one company that did one of the pilot projects is going to spend $210 to $240 million in Utah just this year. And you start rolling that into taxes and, you know, income taxes, property taxes, severance taxes, all of that, and then into the direct and indirect. One of the things that I was involved with at one time was to do, our company that I work for funded a study of what the value to state government, state and local government, was of a single gas well in the Uintah Basin. It was $168,000. Well, these horizontal wells are just monumentally bigger than that, and so the money is there. So let's just make sure that we know what the plans are and where the pains are, and how we can do this together. And so thank you very much for your time,
welcome.
Commissioner.
You know, and I think after yesterday, you know that I come from the oil and gas industry. That's kind of it's in my blood at this point. I think I've eaten drilling mud too, anyway. And so it's a part of my DNA, and that's what we fully support. We make sure we work together on this, so appreciate your time.
Anyone else like to address the board on any issue within our jurisdiction? Seeing none, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back around 10 a.m. to start our formal hearing. And so for our first agenda item, bear with me, I've never had a gavel before. We're in recess.